Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing fine. So welcome back to another session. This is part 2, chapter 5, grade 6 CBSE. And the name of the chapter is Kingdoms, Kings and an Early Republic. So in the last class, we started to talk of Janapads and I told you what does the word Janapad stand for. In today's class, we are going to talk of Mahajanapads. So let's get started. And let's talk of Mahajanapads. So guys, what happened is, in India, if you see, I showed you some of the important Janapads here, right? This is one of them. So those important Janapads that were ruled by a ruler, that were controlled by the ruler, some of them turned out to be more important, more influential, right? So those who started to assert influence or other areas also. So those Janapads, so basically it is Janapads, important Janapads that converted into Mahajanapads, influentials, as the name suggests, Maha. From Janapads, more influential one turned into Mahajanapads. So this all took place around 2500 years ago, as I told you in the last class also, that this whole battle thing and all of this sacrifices, they started 3000 years ago. And things evolved and it took some time. So 2500 years ago, we started to see the existence of Mahajanapads. Now, one of the most important features of Mahajanapads were that these Mahajanapads had a capital city. The Janapads just had an area that they controlled, where people resided. But Mahajanapad, something very special of Mahajanapad is that they not only controlled a specific region, set of people there, but also they had a special place that's called the capital. Okay? And this capital had something very, very special in it. Now, what was so special? Of course, it had influential buildings there, many of the very important buildings. Plus, all those buildings in the capital, they were right within a fortified place. Now, when I say fortified, which means there are so many walls that they used, and this provided a defensive a protection from against all the attacks. Right? So when I say it's being fortified, that means you're trying to secure the place. As you can see in old ancient buildings, we've got it all fortified with a whole lot of big, huge walls that used a lot of wood, that made use of a lot of bricks, if not lakhs, but at least thousands and thousands of bricks, thousands and thousands of stones were used, and a lot of people were engaged in this particular activity. So this was this building, this capital, huge investment. It represented the power of the king. How powerful, how influential he is. The large, the tall, the impressive buildings around the cities to provide protection to the people gives the idea how the king exerted his influence and how influential he is. Nowadays also, if you know, there's a big bungalow, you'll come to know that the person might be quite influential and powerful, as compared to a person living in a house made up of mud, clay. So it all started way back. These pillars, huge bricks, they represent power. And this all enormous use of labor was there. A lot of labor was used for this. Especially men, women, might be children engaged in this. So definitely the king had to employ people to find resources to work, to construct this wall. So now once you've constructed a wall, you definitely need to protect the people. These are the walls that you've erected, and here you've living with all the other people. You're trying to protect them. So now it won't be like voluntary tribute and Bali is going to be there and then you're going to maintain an army that depends on the people's whims and fancies. No. Now the Raja, he had other things to do. He had to protect his people, to exert his influence. So definitely, after fortification, after he fortified the place to show his power, God forbid there's an attack, so definitely he has to maintain a regular army now. So regular army means now the soldiers were there. They were regularly paid. And the king had to inspect it regularly so that, even if there's a slighter scenario of war, they all should be compatible or capable of fighting. So these people, they were paid through these punch marked coins. Right? So all we covered of Mahajanpads is Janpads who started to exert a lot of influence. Those converted into Mahajanpads. So when I say Mahajanpad, it means a place where king lives, and of course there's a capital that is fortified. So if there's a capital, we learned that definitely you need to protect the people, so definitely you need army. And if you need army, you have to pay them. Right? And if you have to pay them, then obviously you need more money. And if you need money, so then that brings us to the next topic. There isn't a plant or a tree that's going to give you from its offshoot some sort of income. You definitely need to convert it, generate the revenue from the people itself. So that brings us to another topic that's called taxes. Yes. Now by now the rulers, they realize that these Mahajanpads, they realize that we've started to exert influence. But at this time, it's equally important to have money to function, to make all this run. So the Mahajanpads, to perform all their jobs, get the forts built, maintain big armies, they definitely needed resources. So that means they have to collect the taxes. They can't depend on occasional gifts. Oh, bhai, come. What have you bought for me? No, bhai, I came khali hand. So, empty hand. So, I didn't get anything from you. No. That's not going to work, right? So, the Raja started to tax the people. He said, you have to pay the tax. So, there were different kinds of taxes. I'm going to introduce you to those different kinds of taxes. Let's start with the very first interesting tax. Every person was to pay the tax. So, first of all, I'm going to start with the farmers. So he said, farmer, come here. You are the most important people. Farmer said, thank you, Raja. And then they said, king needs to be blessed with people like you. You need to prove your worth. So the farmer said, Raja Saab, what can we do for you? He said, okay. From now onwards, we are going to ask you to pay tax. And that tax would be fixed. We don't want to penalize you much. But the tax would be fixed, and that tax would be called banga or share, bro. Whatever you grow, give us some share, and at least 1/6 of the produce. And the farmers were like, oh, that is why he called us. So the farmers were supposed to pay banga, a share, that's 1/6 of the produce. He was not satisfied then. He said, oh, craftsmen, my dear craftsmen, you are talented people. Where are you going? So all the weavers, all the smiths, they gathered at the king's court and they said, what king? So he said, my dear craftsmen, I'm not going to ask you to pay taxes. So the craftsmen, they were very happy. They were like, wow. And just then he said, but all you need to do is come and work for a day every month at the king's palace, and I'll tell you what needs to be done. And then they were like, oh, needless to comment. So the craftsmen would also impose some kind of taxes. The third came, taxes on goods. Whatever you're selling. Now we have taxes on goods, that is, if we are importing it, that's custom tax. And if we are producing it within the country, we call it excise. Something that's manufactured within the country. But that time, this term was not coined, and there were, whatever trade was going on, whatever goods, they had to pay the taxes. And the fourth and the most important one were the hunters, Yes, they didn't even leave the people living in the forest. They said hunters and gatherers. And they said, yes, Raja Sahab. He said, hunters and gatherers, you are very kind people. Whenever you go to the forest, you play with the wild animals. Please don't forget there is a king living here. So I would like to have some sort of gifts from you. And the hunters and gatherers were like, what could we get from the forest to serve you, sir? He said, no, you have to provide me with some sort of forest produce. Right, guys? So we've covered more or less all kinds of people. Also at this time, because the agricultural people, the farmers, they had to pay the taxes. So definitely they had to increase their earning. So in order to increase their earning, there were two important steps or two changes that took place. First of all, one of the very important thing is earlier they used the wooden plow. Now they started to use iron plow. It works efficiently. It produces more grains. So this is the first. And the second thing is, earlier these people, the farmers, what they used to do is they just used to throw the seeds. Right? So now what they've asked to do is that rather than throwing or scattering seeds like here, that you randomly do, you're not asked to do this. You have to increase your production. Ask all the people, all the slaves, make them work with you. Call them dasis or whatever, the sas, but make them work for you. And in order to increase the productivity, you need to first make sure that the plant is in a position that it's going to sprout. That's called transplanting. So first, you have to make sure that the plant has come up with some sprouts. Saplings are grown out of it. Then you put that plant in the ground. So that means you have to transfer the body from one place to another once it started to grow. Transplant can also be said that you try to replant it or maybe replot it or maybe relocate it once it started to show some signs of growth. So this would increase the production and then you'll be in a position to give 1/6 of the tax. That's called the share. And whom you can engage for this? It could be the slaves, the dasis or the sas. Or there's another term that I am going to introduce right here. They were landless agricultural people or agricultural laborers. They were known as kammakarars. Right? So all these people, dasis, the sas and kammakarars, kam karne ko, they were all asked to work in the agricultural field. May it be for plowing purpose or may it be for transplanting. So that's all for today's session. I hope you all enjoyed the session. Till we meet next, please don't forget to subscribe, share and also hit like button. Thank you.